Good evening. It's at 2:30 in the morning in New Zealand, which is where I am at the moment. And we are currently just entering our second day of COVID-19 lockdown and our second day of a national emergency, a 1 week's national emergency declaration. So everybody is confined to their homes and we're only allowed to go out for essential work. All people over the age of 70 are specifically confined to their homes, and so they have to get people to go and do their shopping, etc. So it's a pretty severe type of confinement that we're facing at the moment. And I think there are probably about another 30 countries around the world which are in a much similar sort of state. So it's a very interesting environment to be working in at the present time. Just a bit of brief background. I've been involved in information technology for most of my working life, having worked with IBM and Pricewaterhouse and Ernst & Young across multiple business sectors from financial to manufacturing. And most recently, I've been engaged in teaching through Knowledge Hut and also in the last couple of years with the University of the South Pacific on a major program called Pacific Climate Ready. So I've been throughout the Pacific region across most of the countries, training young people in government and non-government organizations on how to manage projects when faced with climate change types of projects. So it's been a fascinating insight into what's happening in low-lying countries in particular. My other favorite interest is trekking at high altitude in Nepal, and in October and November I was trekking around the Manaslu circuit, and I managed to get altitude sickness as well. However, we're fully recovered from that. So let's take a look at ITSM and digital transformation and see where we're going with that one. So what is it for you? Is it moving from manual processes? Is it setting up a self-service portal? Is it a new way of doing service management? Or are you here just to find out? So let's take a look. Have a look at this. What is a digital transformation? So it's saying the reimagining of a business in more digital terms. So for one of the most classic examples that we've got is the rise of Amazon.com as the major provider of online shopping, if you like, and services. I don't think there's much that you can't get from Amazon these days. And there's been a move away from in-person shopping, if you like. What we call the high street shops are closing. And much of that is due to the enabling of the technology that we have today of being able to ship things around the world very rapidly and to be able to order them. For example, my wife and I have just moved out of the city of Auckland, and we've moved about 180 kilometers away. But yesterday we had 3 courier deliveries of goods and things that she had ordered. So again, without leaving our homes, we're able to provision ourselves and to interface with the world. So part of the ability to do that is from ITSM in terms of how the businesses of today are actually relating to their customers. So what's happening in terms of the digital economy? Well, I've just given you an example, but in terms of reaching different markets and different market spaces, this is what they're talking about. And the types of networks that are being developed, not just in the technological sense, but in terms of the business senses of partnerships, cooperative arrangements, and these types of networks. We do it as consultants, as IT consultants. We leverage across a number of our almost competitive people, but we work in a cooperative environment of sharing businesses and sharing our knowledge and beliefs. I do it through the Project Management Institute of New Zealand, which is a part of a worldwide organization. And I've been a member for many, many years. And it's been great to be able to connect with people in multiple industries, project management in multiple industries, and leverage their knowledge as well so that I can share it with you. So what we're saying here is that the technology is expanding just beyond just information technology. So the technology is going into different areas. And this is to give you some idea of what we're referring to here, that there are these different types of ecosystems, if you like. And down on the right-hand side there, you can see some of the examples that we're talking about here. And so organizations will interconnect with one another and form these bridges, if you like, so that they can better work together. So some of the concepts that we're going to be looking at are what we call the power laws of networks. And, you know, once upon a time, there was a linear relationship, a one-to-one relationship between the value of the network and the size of the network. Then we started to look at the leveraging of these networks, and where we're saying that the value increases as the square of the number of the users in the network. And now we're starting to see this thing called Reed's law, which is exactly what is happening with this COVID environment. We gradually get through to a point, and then we get this exponential growth, where V equals 2 to the nth, where the n is the number of the nodes in the network. And it's just incredible. I mean, what we're seeing with COVID-19 is exactly what happens in commercial types of networks and IT networks. There are a number of related networks. I'm a member of LinkedIn, and you can see there somebody connects with, you connect with somebody else, and you can see who's in their network. And so you're networking with networks when you're connecting in these environments. So this is what they're saying. Network ecosystems must be a core focus and a competency of modern business. And it's information technology, or IT, which is going to be the backbone of that and how it's going to happen. So let's take a look at something in terms of the past and moving into the present. So the environment that we've been used to, and I'm suggesting this is up to about the year 2000, was then this blue line that we've traditionally mumbled along, and we've had incremental growth. And now we're into a situation, I think that this curve has started probably around, well, up in the new millennium, once we got through the Y2K issues, and technology was then totally enabled to get into the future. And so this is where we're seeing these networks scaling up, and we've now got this ability to adapt and transform. The rate of organizational changes is most dramatic as we're going through. So some of the things that we have to face up to in information technology and service management today is looking at the types of tools that we're using. We need to have those before we can get into delivering for businesses, and looking for the missing links in the IT services to increase the value of the business chains. So the way in which we're working forward is to focus on the IT operations, and it's driven as a technology, but not as a business innovation initiative, if you like. So where are we going to go with this in the future? Maybe we should be looking at this type of a framework, that information technology service management is bounded by a number of standards, if you like. So ISO 9000 is our quality management standard overarching the information technology types of things. So ITIL is our library, customer orientated or consumer orientated business information technology, or COBIT, is another one. And then we've got the Carnegie Mellon CMMI, the software engineering integrated standards, etc. So all of these standards go together to support us in creating this environment to respond to business and to develop solutions for business problems. So one of the other issues that we've got is that this legacy from the past, where we've got aging systems, the enterprise resource planning, these massive systems like SAP. We've got centralization, which has a huge bureaucracy, which means it's slow to change. Since 2008, in the global financial crisis, or the GFC, there's been massive underinvestment, not only by governments in infrastructure, but also in organizations. And this is patchy. Many organizations have seen it as an opportunity to invest in IT. Others have tried to stay still, but generally we're saying that there's this underinvestment. And traditionally, we've been working from a data center type of view, a centralized program. This thing called technical debt means that we've been often putting things in place and not quite getting them right, so that we have to go back and re-engineer them and try and do quick fixes to meet requirements without actually getting a full system going. Another thing is looking at IT as a cost rather than as a facilitator, or as something which is going to help the business. So again, trying to drive out costs in the IT, which is counterproductive in terms of, okay, if we want information technology to be an enabler of the business, then why are we trying to drive it out of its costs? The other thing that we find is that legacy skills, such as people being able to do COBOL programming, also that happens around quite a lot. And then there's people working on proprietary systems or closed platforms without using application program interfaces. So some of these are some of the what we call the digital deadlocks that are preventing organizations from moving forward. So what do we want to have in the ITSM of tomorrow? So it becomes an integrator, it becomes a partner for business, it is an innovator in terms of bringing potential solutions to business and saying, hey, what about this? Could we use this type of technology in terms of building the business? It becomes a leader rather than a server. Rather than being a servant of business, we're actually leading the businesses and saying, here is an enabling technology, how can we use it? And we're obviously being a service broker, but also we're accelerating the growth of the businesses, and we're assisting our companies and our enterprises by differentiating them by the use of technology. So some of those technologies, for example, could be artificial intelligence. It could be a whole range of things. But in terms of the service management, it needs to consist of adaptable teams who are empowered to choose their own and make their own decisions within a certain specific framework, and then to have what we call lean and agile ways of working. So the use of the lean processes and the agile technology processes. Agile can also be scaled, so we can have scaled agile frameworks for enterprises. It's not just small groups of people. The other thing is to have decentralized support rather than these monolithic centralized programs. And so decentralized support can be across multiple countries. And this means that we have service centers that are providing a follow the sun type environment, a 24-hour, 7 days a week service level. And the clear focus is on delivering value, of not being regarded as a cost center, but in actual fact, enabling the business to make better profits. So here's a graphic, and this is worthwhile having a good look at, not just right now, but come back and have a look at the replay on YouTube and have a good look at some of these things. You'll notice that on the left-hand side, we've got the old pyramidal approach, the top-down management approach, if you like. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got the new agile environment, if you like, the networked environment. And so you can see over there that there's a whole range of partners associated with this and affiliates associated with this, where applications can be developed. One of the models that I often think of when I think about this is when Apple launched the iPhone, they didn't try to provide all the apps that were going to go with it. They opened it up and put out the APIs to developers. And so the Apple Store was being populated by applications being developed by people at home. And this was a huge expansion of enablement of ITSM in a partnership environment. So most of the apps that we get these days, whether we're working on Android or Apple, are coming from, you know, the Google store or whatever it might be, or the iPhone store. So you can get those applications, and they're all coming from these networks of different groups of people working on it. So ITSM transformation starts with its capability. It needs to have an outside-in focus. In other words, instead of focusing what the business is doing internally, we need to be looking at what's changing outside of the business. Where could the business be going? And doing that. And we're actually augmenting IT operations. It's got to be execution driven, not just by a response to the events that are changing outside. Although I've got to say that in the current COVID environment, we might be in a response type of mode at the moment. We need to be using larger data sets. We need to be gathering this information from multiple different sites. Things like companies like Cambridge Analytica, for example, who used the massive amounts of data that they were able to skim out of Facebook to actually target people and organizations with different messages, of using artificial intelligence techniques to scan masses of people to determine profiles or generic profiles to target information or messages to. So these are some of the, if you like, leading edges of this outside in type of focus that I can think of. So this is where, and using these larger data sites from, you know, Facebook and other social media and Twitter and so on that people can actually access. And the other thing is we need to design processes in line with the almost a manufacturing approach of varying variances and tolerances, and having an ability to manage exceptions and to create you know, error paths for automation, if you like to put it that way. So one of the visuals that I often like is this image of the iceberg. That 7/8 of the iceberg is hidden, if you like, by the water, and what might be visible on the top is IT service management, but underneath that, we've still got this legacy of applications and systems that are operating that we need to move on and move past. So often this is what's dragging companies behind. So what are the skills that we need in the future? And how should information technology leadership do it? So one of the things that we're seeing is that some of these business strategies, intimate understanding of our core business processes, these are key things that are necessary for people in information technology to understand. We're not just being response driven, we are actually trying to take a lead on these sort of things. And then the two things that are outside of the box there, the ability to link the usage of new technologies, big data analytics, etc., into a business outcomes, and how can we do that? Effective communication at the senior management level, connecting with IT so that they understand what we can offer them, and that's one of the ways to go. Some of the things that have been missing in the communication structures. So shifting from delivery to a services model, building new skill sets. The AI environment is going to be huge in the future. Using the Agile techniques to get short sprints to deliver applications and to deliver functionality, and an ability to prioritize the types of projects. So focusing on innovation rather than just business as usual. So how can we capitalize on what we call the golden age of IT? So think like a 21st century CEO. Think of and understand strategy, understanding vision, missions, and then driving them into goals and objectives. And from that becomes projects and what we need to put into our service portfolio. How do we manage customer service and support? And how do we get that as a great experience for our customers? Things like governance need to be considered as to the transparency of our operations. What's the value to our shareholders? What are the policies that we're putting in place? We need to understand the financial indices, if you like, the return on investment, the value of investment, understanding what capital expenditures are. So as IT professionals, we also need to understand the economics of business and how our companies are operating. We need to have an understanding of marketing. So the more we look at this, the more IT service management is encompassing in fact, a very broad spectrum of where our enterprises are working. And the other thing, of course, is that we need to be constantly changing and adapting and researching and developing things. And if you like, being what we call being ahead of the curve, anticipating where things are going to move and moving forward with those ones. So here are some examples of what we call decentralized and collaborative IT service management models. Some companies who've embraced this. And there's this lovely word in here called nimble, which means to be very quick on your feet and being able to change very, very rapidly. These are some of the clear examples. I can speak from my experience of working with IBM that it's been a company which is obviously in the information technology business, was leading in hardware, and then around 2000 took the decision to say, no, it's all going to be software and services driven, and they set up IBM Global Solutions. And this company has morphed itself to be still a leader after over 100 years, 110 years in business, where some of its major competitors of 20 or 30 years ago have long since ceased to be in the same type of business. So I think that we're seeing changes. If you think back to Apple Corporation, they were bailed out by Bill Gates and Microsoft 20 years ago. And then look where they are today. Probably the most greatest capitalized company on the United States stock market, or they were. So there are changing fortunes. And so it's the seizing of the digital economy, if you like. And so there's three major streams to the transformation journey. One is in terms of the customer experience. Then there's the internal customer, the worker's experience. And then there are our suppliers and our partners who are involved in our goods and services. So these three parts need to be integrated and taken forward. And you can see where we've come from in terms of, on the left-hand side here, our legacy silos of functions, CRM, the intranet, enterprise resource planning, and so on. And all of those traditional functions of organizations moving into this new model where we're looking for customer experience, making it more personalized. I've noticed this massive change in recent times with some of the leading organizations. For example, when I was just setting up my new home and having to connect with a new provider of electricity, they're offering bundled packages of internet as well as telecommunications, and I can get my cell phone through them as well. I can get my gas. I could probably even get my water, but electricity and water don't often go well together. But the customer experience I've had is that people are using their first names. They're getting back to you. They called me back and left me messages and said, listen, this is where things are up to. So it's a two-way street that we're getting now with the customer services. And internally, organizations need to be taking care of their people. And so the culture of management has got to change. So it's no longer the top down, the boss is right. It's got to be a cooperative relationship between modern workers and modern management, and working as teams as distinct to this hierarchical structure that we have had in the past. And so down on the right-hand side, you can see some of the enabling in emerging technologies that are moving to work with, to supply these types of relationships. So more about those. How do we go from the old legacy approach to the next gen approach? And so you can see down there, we're talking about leadership, we're talking about collaborations, we're actively talking about champions and people who are going to be entrepreneurs inside of the organization, and also looking outside of the organization. Who's out there that's leading the pack, if you like, in terms of these new technologies or innovative ways of doing business? Many of us can remember when Skype first came out as one of the first networking video conferencing approaches to take. Now here we are, we've got Zoom, we've got a plethora of different platforms that we can use to communicate with people, and we can communicate, in groups amongst our friends. Facebook Messenger is another way of doing it. WhatsApp is a secure form. Multiple platforms of being able to interface and communicate in both our business and our personal lives. So the the whole thing is more in a cooperative environment, as you can see, coaching and using ombudsmans for decentralized IT, and again picking up on these networks of groups of people out there who are developing applications and who are being innovators. So that's what we're talking about in terms of the next gen. So in terms of the modern mandate for information technology, business-oriented IT, that's what it's got to be, not response-oriented. We've got to be looking outside of what we used to refer to as the IT shop. We're no longer a monolithic, centralized process. We've got to be innovative and pick up on these groups that we can work with. It can't happen in this silo. We've got to look at the networks. So how do we do it? Agile service delivery, the use of things like Agile frameworks, the use of short sprints and scrums and so on in terms of developing the software and delivering applications and functionality to the users. And the other thing is to make sure that the customer and employee experiences are at the heart of what we're trying to do with IT and the business initiatives, so that we're serving our internal and our external customers. And again, having good practices of governance and transparency, as well as compliances, and things like ITIL as the frameworks, the ISO 9000s, etc. These are industry standards which we need to adopt and keep working. So one of the comments that's come through is that the first element of a big type of transformation, it's not technical, it's about leadership. And if you don't have senior managers aligned and walking the talk, then you're not going to have that type of change at all. So it's not only got to be the words, but it's also got to be the actions of senior management to bring it about. So with ITL level 4, it's now going agile, so we can now use the concepts and the technology of agile development with ITL 4. So service management elements from previous versions, it's focusing on value, it's flexible and what we call a value-centric approach. And then the key elements of the culture and values, the guiding principles, moving processes to practices, and then having what we call the ITIL service value system. So it's no longer a choice, it's something that we have to do. So just as we're responding to COVID and we're coping with it, we need to respond to digital transformation and get, as we say, get on board and get moving with it. So listen, thank you for being part of this webinar.